Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com, debatephysics.com. Also, but you can't get debaters to participate in a argument, counter-argument kind of conversation. But we do have somebody who asked a question anyway, and premises it with sort of a commentary, so that's good. And so we'll do something with that instead. And there's no point even mentioning, Ian Gosling. He's done another video. I didn't even watch it because it's the kind of thing where you don't have to do the experiment. We already know exactly what the forces are involved. You can do a force diagram, and it shows you everything you need to know, and it's just nonsense. I mean, it's this argument that he's arguing because I changed the arc at which something travels, that somehow because it goes more distance, it means it has more energy. And it doesn't. Okay, it just means it has more time to go this way. If you shoot two things at an angle 45 degrees, you can understand the one with the higher velocity will go higher, okay? And so it will spend more time going this way. Because the two vectors, as physics points out, don't have anything to do with each other. The velocity down from gravity doesn't have anything to do with the velocity this way from your initial force. So he's using it as a proof, because if you shoot at an angle, you can get it to go 4 times the distance. And obviously, if you don't shoot at an angle, it only goes twice the distance. So obviously, I could just argue that that proves how much energy they have. Now, in both cases, it can be understood that the experiment is not extracting energy from the objects in any way. You're not measuring it on any scale. You're not collecting the energy. There's no way you're measuring its energy, because no force or mechanism is theoretically taking the energy. Now, there is a tiny bit of air resistance, and eventually that'll consume all the energy. But that you have to wait for that eventuality, which would take a while. So theoretically, you're not measuring energy in any way. So it's just these lie videos with lie titles. It's so disrespectful to anything called the logical process or anything scientific. Okay, science isn't about making silly claims on even sillier evidence. Yeah. Okay, so on to this guy, who has, unfortunately, from my perspective, an unpronounceable name. So anyway, so we'll just play the video.
Hi, DraftScience. I had a question that I wanted to ask. By the way, I love a lot of the things that you do. I don't always come to the same conclusions, but at least you're thinking and asking questions.
Yeah, well, everybody's got to do more than that. I mean, thinking and asking questions when all the questions are abstract and silly, and they don't ask the simple questions like, well, why didn't they test 1 pound dropped 4 feet and 4 pounds dropped 1 foot? I mean, in 350 years, why didn't they do that test? It's not asking too much. I mean, doing this simple experiment, just calculating this for the sake of physics understanding. I put a mouse on the scale, and the scale deflects a certain amount. I mark that amount, and then I just turn the scale this way, and it pushes the mouse at a certain velocity. Same thing for an elephant. And the fact is that the velocity is going to be the same for both, because the force that went in is the same for both, in the sense that proportional to their mass, they got a force proportional to their mass. And so they'll end up with a momentum leaving that'll be proportional to their momentum that bent the scale in the first place. Now, that experiment is not complicated. That hasn't been done in 350 years. That's the question to ask. Why is the science so uninterested in proving its claims? It seems like it's just a religion. They just tell you the story, and you're supposed to just say, yes, I believe, or no, I don't believe, and that's it. But it doesn't have anything to do with science or evidence or even logic, because frankly, to do logic, you need facts. and they just aren't interested in acquiring anything called a fact.
And they don't want to engage.
Right, they don't want to talk about their elemental assumptions about reality. They don't want to discuss what proof there is, okay, that Jesus was the Son of God. And that's all, like MV squared is just a Jesus theory. It's just some silly thing they're proposing as a fact, and yet they have no reasoning, no logic, or evidence to defend it.
But I was thinking of a question. I wanted to get your thoughts on it. They claim, the physicists claim, that at the Big Bang.
So all of these talk about what happened 15 billion years ago, or 300 billion years ago, or 9 million billion years ago, seems to me to be out of place. Okay, in the sense that we just don't have those footprints. You know, those get erased by time. So finding evidence of that is, I think, unrealistic. And the the underlying mechanism, whatever it is, has to be energy conservational. You would argue that whatever the universe is, you could put it in different forms or push it into different shapes, but it's going to have the same stuff that it has in it now. And the real problem is that they've just thrown in some fake axioms that because you can do the geometry for figuring out motion in the universe by thinking of Jupiter as a point and thinking of the Earth as a point, and its center of mass, and you can use that formalization, that shortcut, to understanding its motion. That shortcut will work because you're not trying to figure out what causes the Earth to move or what causes Jupiter to move. You're just saying, what's the motion doing? So for the sake of drawing it or simulating it, making it very, very small or infinitely small doesn't hurt you any, okay, in doing those calculations. But really has nothing to do with reality. They're not infinitesimally small things. So the very fact that they make these cheats and these shortcuts and then turn those into facts, like somehow electrons don't occupy any space, when you know they have mass and they have momentum, and yet you're going to pretend they don't use up any space. It's just a silly argument.
The universe, everything in it, was infinitely dense and infinitely hot.
So it doesn't mean anything because it's all a singularity. So they're saying it's all of those things in some infinitely small space. So it's all baby talk from my perspective. That's why it's useless. I don't even see how it's a starting point for a theory. It really doesn't mechanically extrapolate into the active universe we see, where material objects take up a huge amount of space, and there's just no evidence of this infinitesimality. And there's every evidence that every bit of space and motion has to be accounted for.
Now, heat, there's no such thing as heat, really. It's just a description. There's temperature. And
well, I would argue that heat is the force, in the sense that the force that moves matter, so that in a sense can be called heat. The stuff moving, the force moving, is converted into matter moving. So when you convert it into matter moving, you've done a heat exchange, that is a force exchange. So I don't know if the word is totally useless as a statement. I mean, I think it is better just to use the words force and matter and understand that one thing is all about motion and the other thing is all about the consumption of motion. That is the consumption of energy, in the sense that it takes matter moves much slower than the force moves.
Temperature is simply the measure of how energetic a particle is.
So again, this whole word particle, there's only, frankly, there's two particles, electrons and protons. Now, the force, I would say, is as Newton would have said, a corpuscle. It's it's an entity. So if you want to call it a particle, that's fine. But you have to make these distinctions between, something that's a million times smaller than the other thing first. You don't call a rock a planet. So, I mean, you got to be a little bit careful about the vocabulary. And the fact is that they have these fundamentally different states. Matter is dead. It has no capacity to do anything. And the force is where all the motion is. And the force has to actually be stuck to the matter for the matter to move. And understanding that, in my opinion, explains everything. I mean, everything fits together just fine. Understanding that matter collects force, and when it collects it, there's less force loose. Therefore, the universe gets colder, right, as matter moves more.
Quickly or energetically is it moving around, right? So if it's moving around really fast, that's really quote unquote hot.
Well, it's hot in the sense that it's converting a lot of free force that was going the speed of light, into force going a lot slower than the speed of light.
But if you're infinitely dense, where do you have room to move around? You can't even move a Planck length.
They're saying everything's in the same place. So again, the very idea that they actually think there's some capacity for two electrons to be in the same place, that they had to create a law against it, Dirac's law. It's just, again, it's on its face silly. Okay, two electrons don't occupy the same space. And so I guess I would use the example again of the neutron star. We know that neutrons are, they decompose into an electron and a proton. So you're saying, okay, if you know that, then you know everything you need to know. That if you can compact matter into electron and proton pairs, the fact is they're a lot closer to each other. And you can put a lot of mass, a lot of electrons and protons in a very small amount of space if they're in the form of combinations of electron, proton.
Without, there's already something there that prevents you, because you're infinitely dense, you're infinitely packed together. Where would you even have any room to move around?
Well, everything could move. So you could say if I put all the chairs next to each other and there's no space between the chairs, I can just move the whole row of chairs.
Wouldn't that be the definition of absolute zero? No motion at all. So why don't they say that the universe was infinitely dense and infinitely cold?
So again, who cares? I would say this physics is so far from being relevant to anything or meaningful or useful. When the real question is, again, they're telling you that momentum isn't energy, and that I'm just saying it's such a bold claim, and that it doesn't have to be conserved, and that there's some squared function, and it takes 25 times the fuel to spin a motor 5 times as fast. I mean, ludicrously stupid things they're claiming. So I'm just saying, in light of that, you're telling me this isn't important. This Holy Ghost part of the Bible, right? If we just take all the references to the Holy Ghost and say, oh yeah, let's pay attention to that. Well, you're sort of missing the point that they're claiming this guy's a Messiah. I mean, isn't that the more important bullshit? I mean, can an investigation of the Holy Ghost lead anywhere meaningful? I don't think it can. Is it going to tell you whether there's a heaven or a hell? Is it going to tell you anything? No, it's not going to tell you anything.
I don't think that's the case at all.
Yes, I also don't think it's the case at all. I think the universe is capable of. The argument would be is, all right, do we think it evolves? Okay, in the sense of changes. So their theory sort of says that somehow the matter blew up, and then it's reconsolidating into galaxies, and that somehow the galaxies are going to reconsolidate into something else that we haven't seen yet, and that somehow it's going to all crush back into little black hole-y thing stuff, and then do this, maybe explode again. I don't know. So we know there's repeatable patterns. We know that supernovas are a consequence of this evolution of a massive object. And there's evidence that bigger things can explode, and when they explode, they leave residue and all that kind of stuff. And those are a lot of the lensing images, I would argue, are clearly, they sort of have the appearance of a smoke ring, a residue ring. They don't, because they're uneven. They're not. They have no appearance of being as exact as gravity would be. A very gravitational body would be. So there's lots of reason to think the universe is just doing this simple thing where the energy of the universe, pushes matter. The matter condenses, and as it condenses, it starts to absorb more and more energy. That is, it gets hot. Stuff gets hot. So it's consuming the energy by moving the matter in uselessly back and forth, motions. And to do that, to heat the center of the Earth, for example, the external universe arguably is colder. So therefore, it's making less gravity. And as if it makes less gravity, that means that the object has higher pressure, it's going to expand. And so you could argue that galaxies are just doing that. That they're just engines, they go forever, they just constantly get a little bigger, and then they get a little smaller, and they get a little bigger, and they get a little smaller. Because of this rate at which the universe is consuming, heating matter, pushing matter, versus how much free energy there is. So the free energy in the universe is dictated by how much energy is caught up pushing matter. And those two things are just cycling forever. So anyway, but yeah, okay, fine. To me, it's it's such a minorly of minor interest, that part of the evolution of the universe, when people haven't really even dealt with the evolution of their own biological form and what we are doing intellectually and psychologically and all of that, and they haven't even dealt with that crap yet. How full of shit their own brain is. Worrying about how much shit is inside of Pluto is, just kind of a waste of neurons, frankly. All right, so I appreciate the response. Thank you. I probably should have left a comment on my video or something, so I could have found it. He sent me an email, and an email I don't check too often. But anyway, so that was all good. This has got this fake name, gonna end forgotten something or other 321. So I don't know what. Anyway, it's Tyler the Kook, and he makes this stupid argument here about, he doesn't even understand the subject, and so he said you could also simulate a 100-pound sprinting, charging at 20 miles per hour, and a 200-pound linebacker jogging at 10 miles an hour, and understand they are relatively similar. Yeah, that's my argument, you dumbass. You were supposed to say, 100 pounds going, you either go 4 times the speed. You have to either change the speed or you have to change the weight by 4 to 1, okay? Not 100 to 200. Your argument is that a 50-pound person going 20 miles an hour is the same as a 200-pound person going 10 miles an hour. That's your physics, retard. The physics you're defending, you stupid fuck. It's just so fucking bad. The Jerry Hall says, thinking is not enough. You need to rethink and see where your original thinking went wrong. Diaz never does that. Because, my original thinking is always sound. Because I'm always saying, well, what are the facts? And, add them up correctly. Make that effort. So, frankly, I get right answers a lot more than I get wrong answers. Okay, I make a lot fewer mistakes than you're certainly making, you fucking piece of human garbage. I mean, all your assumptions and presumptions, all of your fake premises, your fake axioms that you believe for no good reason because they told you so. And the stuff doesn't make any sense. Again, just simple things where you find out that they calculated the mass of the electron using 1/2 mv squared. And is it just a coincidence that, well, with their calculated mass of the electron and the proton, we don't weigh our electron and proton mass? That is, our weight is far in excess of what the electrons and protons weigh. Well, it's because they used the wrong formula, you dumb fucks. So it's sort of obviously a wrong answer. It's sort of telling you, maybe we should rethink that, right? I mean, if electrons and protons are the substance of any elemental form, and then we're going to claim that the electrons and protons don't add up to your mass, well, then maybe we don't have the right answer. Maybe we're not using the right formula. Yeah, maybe. So, anyway. All right, so I'll leave it there. It's just, there really just is no point talking to this audience, because this audience is just so hostile and fanatically attached to all of these this unproven religion that they're calling a science. Again, just no evidence. And then, the fact is that the evidence they have is really tainted. Again, the fact that they all use the same little silly carts to do the experiment, right? And the carts are this weird configuration where they have a bunch of metal wheels. Why would you use carts, plastic carts with metal wheels, and call that low friction? What that is high angular momentum. That is, its velocity won't be its momentum, because it's got a bunch of momentum caught up in the little metal wheels. I mean, silly shit like that, where you're just saying, now doesn't it obviously look like shenanigans? When if they want to make a car that travels the most distance for the least amount of energy, like a propeller car or something, then they use great big thin wheels, that almost weigh nothing. They have a completely different low friction cart when they really need it to be low friction, right? I mean, why don't they make solar cars with a bunch of little wheels, little metal wheels? Oh, it's because it doesn't work. That's why. Oh, yeah. So it's just so corrupt, so broken. Yeah, such bullshit. And these are people that have, they obviously have enough intelligence to be interested in physics, to spend time thinking about, this modeling things, but somehow it just always goes back to, always reverts to some totem pole bullshit, some unicorn, glittery, fake reality that everybody has to pretend exists. So they can't deal with the real reality. Alright, anyway, just very disappointing, interacting with the biological life forms on Earth.